For 20 years, we've been creating innovation in the CX industry, and now we're seeking out brilliant new perspectives on CX you just won't find anywhere else. I'm Richard Owen. Welcome to the CX Iconoclast. My guest today, Sean Albertson, is an original CX thinker whose recent and award-winning book, CX 4 Rocks, is making a valuable contribution, in my opinion, to the customer experience thought leadership field. Sean has, prior to writing, a long and successful career at the sharp end of customer experience analytics, having worked most recently for Schwab as the head of client experience measurement and analytics. Well, that's pretty high in my esteem, given Schwab's leadership in customer experience, and Sean brings that and other program leadership experiences into his work today. During our conversation, Sean explains the thinking behind his 4 Rocks metaphor and how he brings it to bear on the practical aspects of building programs. And he focuses also on how practitioners can use that framework to understand better the challenges and solutions around creating change in organizations, especially around contact center environments. I hope you enjoy. Sean, thanks very much for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Maurice, for having me. It's awesome to join you today.
Great. I want to start by, of course, congratulating you on publishing the book that I think's been out in the market now a few months. Morris has written far more books than I ever have. Mercifully, I surrendered after one. I think, how many did you do, Morris? What was it?
I've done 4 in all, if you count the cartoon book with my notes in it that my brother did as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and they mysteriously keep selling for
that's
6
I mean,
years.
just how many more copies can your wife buy? I mean, there's a limit, right?
You've spotted the trick.
So Sean, the old gag was the only type of writing that pays well is ransom notes.
Yes.
But I mean, we really respect the fact that you published a book. We know how much effort it takes. And you sort of positioned it, and correct me if I'm wrong, as something of a sort of sequel to the effortless experience. Is that the right way to think about it?
A little bit, yes. I mean, the effortless experience, the studies that CEB did, Matt Dixon, Rick DeLisi, I've met and know those guys pretty well and have talked to them a lot in this transition, but it really spoke to me. But not only that, there was so much truth to what they showed. And so I, very early in my career, or, middle part of my career, kind of embraced the customer effort score and that whole strategy, and have really built on it. And, talked, more about how to implement than here's what the research shows. And that's really what the book was, is kind of a guide to, hey, if you think about this, here's what you can do with it. Cause, it's definitely execution is the key.
So given that, what would you tell the audience in terms of the big takeaway in terms of execution?
Well, one is you've got to do something, right? You too often when
requires execution.
Exactly. You can't, you've got to be able to think about it, saying, when we measure in customer experience and user experience and brand and any of the X's, in fact, I hate putting a letter in front of experience. I'd rather we just talk about the experience because it's all, combined. But, it's just making sure that you're understanding that you're not just measuring to have a metric and see how it goes. You're measuring for purpose. Otherwise, you are just literally measuring for measurement's sake. And the whole point of customer experience or any of the experiences is do something with what you learn and then improve upon your business model. And that's the key. And so it does take collaboration, because at the end of the day, for most businesses, everybody across the business influences the experience in some way. And so you've got to get teams aligned and people aligned and departments aligned to really focus on the experience and do it together. You can't just do it in silos.
When the effortless experience came out, one of the things that I thought was most useful as a contribution was this focus on a certain type of experience, which at the end of the day wasn't really about creating moments of wow or whatever you want to call it, but was really about trying to do fairly hygienic things, friction-oriented tasks, and just do them well and sort of going home happy. And
Yeah.
is there a risk that in doing this and in taking this to its full extent, we've become somewhat myopically focused on this idea of the customer experience equals customer service? Because you talk about the need to get lots of people involved, but the contact center in particular tends to get very narrowly focused.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the drawbacks when we put the letter in front of X is we start to put those silos on ourselves, or those blinders on to what we're focused on. And the other thing that's changed since, 2013, when the book was published, and the years prior when the research was done, is the channels that we interact with customers have multiplied greatly. And, now instead of the traditional, phone, well, in the old days, mail, literal physical mail and phone systems and maybe websites, and then now it's apps and then social media and any number, chat bots and all of this new technology that increases the way to communicate with the customer. Here's the problem. The experience is the connection or potentially disconnection between all those channels. Customer service is only one piece of the overall picture. And so thinking about experience and the journey of a customer, this is really where the whole, idea of my book came from. It's like a river. The customer journey is like a river. We like to think it's nice and straight and smooth. And, maybe they're on an inner tube with a cold one, and it's our customers are happy and it's great. But the reality is they're bouncing off the rocks. The river is winding back and forth because they're trying different channels, and then they're running into rapids and things like that. And so really that idea that it's more often now the challenge is the connective tissue or lack thereof between the channels than it is the channels themselves. We've gotten pretty good at channel and task. I call, I get an issue resolved. Great. It was easy. I was online. I got the issue resolved. Great. It was easy. I tried 4 different channels to get my issue resolved, and it's still not resolved. That's the journey that most companies are struggling with today, because it takes everyone across the organization to be able to pitch in on that one, because we're all responsible.
And so it's been a long-standing lament, I think, in the whole CX industry, that there's been too much segmentation, if you like, too narrow a focus on different elements of experience. But I would argue that's only increased in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah.
In fact, I think COVID drove a lot of people to say, well, we need to make investments in the contact center, because all of a sudden, that's where the action is. Mm-hmm. And contact center teams became increasingly focused on how do we just optimize this narrow set of experience, and is somewhat more insular. And so are you making an argument they need to break out of that, or are you accepting that as a reality?
I think we're not going to change how businesses are designed. Channels have leaders have agendas. That's not really going to change. I mean, really good organizations are doing things differently in that space. They're creating cross-functional teams focused on individual collaborative journeys. But fundamentally, your channel is always going to have a leader. The key is understanding and realizing that you're on the bank of that river, your customer is flowing down. You got to look upstream and downstream, and you've got to think about how do you come together and create the handoff. And that's where a lot of the new technology, whether it's, generative AI or anything else, is really going to help us create more connection between that, those different channels, so that, if I, as a consumer, am online trying to find something, and then I hit click to call, and I'm now talking to an agent, that agent should see in summary, not here's all my web logs, but like in summary, here's what they were trying to do, so that they're already a step ahead in that, understanding that experience.
So let's. I do want to dig into this idea of how you think technology is going to solve this problem, because I think you can make a counter case that technology has actually entrenched this problem. But I'm really interested in that. But before we do that, I think it's worth explaining about the rocks. So for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, why don't you give us the headlines?
Absolutely. Well, as I started to really look at it, and again, all of my work is based on making things easier, because, it's the fault of this little thing in our hands all the time. It's got to be easy or our customers leave. And that's only getting worse because the younger generations, I mean, my son, he's a freshman in college. he basically tried to do his entire application in college on his phone and wondered why it wasn't working, and literally made the statement when it wasn't working, say, well, maybe I shouldn't go to a school that can't do it on, on the phone. Right. It's
Fair
like,
enough.
what?
Fair enough.
Yeah. But, and so it's all really about making it easy. And so if you want to make things easy, the challenge for most organizations isn't that they don't know they've got problems. Usually it's they've got too many problems to figure out. And so the litmus of the book was finding the rocks, understanding the rocks, analyzing them, and then doing something different. So there, in the research, when I really boiled down all the different challenges that companies have, it really kind of comes into 4 areas. That's why it's 4 rocks. And the first one is, if you translate that to real life geology, sedimentary, layers of complexity, silos. Anything that creates separation in your organization creates rocks. Lack of communication, any of that. And there's plenty of examples of that. Of course, as businesses grow, one of the worst rocks out there is having to be bounced around and transferred between departments just because of the layers of complexity. Metamorphic rocks, on Earth come from change, coal to diamonds, and any change that we do as a business creates rocks for our customers. You change your brand, you change your product, you change your service, mergers and acquisition, any change can really create a great amount of pain and challenges and rocks for your customers. Igneous, fire, lava, right? This is, I spent 15 years in telco. An outage, major landslide of rocks on our customers, any sort of outage you have, and or financial situations, and fires that you just have to put out. Obviously those are rocks, and those are the 3 kind of rocks on Earth. And then I realized, there's external factors as well. So meteorites, meteors, coming from space. And so now those rocks really are from very external factors. The biggest meteoric rock that unfortunately was an extinction level event for a lot of companies was COVID. And that nobody expected it. It came from the outside, and that was something that really impacted, the businesses. So that's really where the 4 rocks come from. And the idea being, if you understand their source, change, silos, et cetera, now you can do things proactive to get in front of them. They'll slip through, but you can do something. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I feel like I'm getting a geology lesson. I really wish I paid more attention to any of this when I was at school. But no, it's a clever metaphor. So well done for thinking that one. I especially like the meteoric one, because obviously COVID springs to mind.
Yeah.
It's kind of synonymous with black swan events, right? Unanticipatable things we assume to have 0 probability, but actually just have low probability.
Exactly.
And you could argue that any business today is at risk of its own personal meteoric rock because of potentially new competitors emerging that simply weren't anticipated or couldn't be anticipated.
Yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a society-wide event. It's just somebody pops up and all of a sudden they're your competition. You could argue that generative AI is competition for Google. Obviously they're piling into it themselves, but search is extremely vulnerable. Probably the biggest risk to search we've seen in the last 20 years. But picking up on this topic of technology and how it can solve the problem versus entrench the problem, right? How do you see companies understanding how technology can actually solve this? And I'm thinking of the investment companies trying to make in some simple ideas like CDP. Well, CDP is not necessarily that simple, but even the idea that you can have joined up data on customers seems to be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and there's really 2 challenges with that. There's the legacy of the business that is further entrenching when new technology is placed on that legacy, further entrenching that siloed behavior. The reality in my mind, and this is a lot of what I speak about with companies or keynotes, is it is the important. I know OCX absolutely is focused on it, bringing that data together, because that's really where the story is across all of that data. But a lot of companies are still stuck in their data silos. Big focus on moving to the cloud or creating big data environments to do the kind of analytics and research on. But when the data is separate, if you put technology on it, you're just putting technology on, separated data. That being said, most companies also are too myopic in their view of what technology can do. They're thinking about it, and I've talked to plenty of call center managers. I want to use technology to stop calls from coming in. That is all they are talking about. Well, what about creating a better experience? No. Let's just stop calls coming in because that'll be a better. Exactly.
The economics of call avoidance are really well understood.
Exactly, and in the reality, technology only does what people tell it to do. So the issue isn't the technology; it's what people think about when they use the technology. So my message is, take a step back. Take this opportunity in time, which greater than any other opportunity in the past, honestly, is saying, how does technology bring us together versus separate us, versus separate our business, versus create additional silos? Because, again, if our focus is on that river, that entire journey, that seamless journey from channel to channel, from people to technology and back, you have a different view. Now you can start to look at that emerging technology for what it can be, not what it is. The other issue I see often is vendors who deploy technology, they have to come up with their market, their product. What does it do? How is it different from everybody else? So now what you end up is you've got, vendors that are building technology that only do one function. And so when I talk, a lot of vendors want to talk to me, and I talk to a lot of vendors about, things like that. The reality is, if their focus is too narrow, I don't really want to talk to them too much, because that's a limitation in their own strategy. As we move forward, this technology will enable us to come together. So I'll use an example. And this is something, this is a real example that, you might think it's ahead of its time, but really there's a lot of companies that are doing this. But I call in, I know something's going to happen on my account, and I call in. Well, the IVR, the phone tree, recognizes what's going to happen and says, hey, is this why you're calling? Why, yes. All right, let me get you to that department. No pounding on buttons or yelling representative to try to get through, and then routes you to the agent. But not only that, they've popped to that agent. Here's this customer. Here's their information. Here's what they're calling about. And it's the right group. And so, simplifying that. And then it's just making sure the pieces of your customer experience puzzle are connected. And that is the fundamental challenge. But it's also the opportunity some of this technology can really do, because the generative part of the new AI, the ability to look at all this data but summarize it, is incredible, because agents have been looking up past notes, the last time you called, for years. But the problem is they're trying to read through a lot of different data. Generative AI can look at, summarize, here's the last, the key topics from the last 5 calls. That might be why they're calling today. Let me move you ahead in that context.
I think that's a really exciting idea, right? And it falls into the broad category of prediction. If we can predict behavior of customers, if we can predict why customers are calling in, right? In manufacturing circles, the obvious focus has been on, let's get data from the actual product, let's get IoT data, and let's use that to predict issues. So we can even be proactive. We can reach out to customers and say, we see you have a problem. And you talk about telecommunications and networks going down, right? Everything's probabilistic in that space. Is what's the likelihood that something's going to go down? Can you jump in front of it? So in that way, we're solving a problem of trying to give better service by having to relieve customers of the burden of trying to explain the problem by making it more efficient to get them to a resolution. Mm-hmm. But I'm still intrigued. I think that the contact center, and I don't know whether you agree with this. One of the big takeaways in the effortless experience in some ways was that at the end of the day, the best we can accomplish in these kind of service interactions is not screw up. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Right. But at the end of the day, the goal is to do a good enough job, get through this, try and serve customers the way they want to be served, and get out at the lowest cost. And that does sort of drive people towards this idea of this is all just a cost minimization exercise. When you're talking about getting broader viewpoints here, Do you think the biggest obstacle is going to be technology, or is it going to just be organization? At the end of the day, the problem is that we're a long way away from creating effective organizations that know how to solve problems across organizational boundaries.
I do think it's more of a people issue than it is technology. I think, technology will do what we need it to do and what we ask it to do. People, by default, we have to narrow scope to survive. We can't all, we as people just can't handle trying to do everything. The whole epitome of boiling the ocean. So when you put a group of people together that are part of a business, it gets even more, challenging in that context, because they're like, I can only do what I can do, so I'm going to focus here. The unfortunate reality too is it means that we have to reach out and communicate more, and we all know that kind of activity is actually getting less, especially as the employees are getting younger and younger. This idea of just having a lot of communication, especially in conversation, is actually getting a little bit more interesting because of, again, cell phone and technology and things like that. But the opportunity, I believe, is use the technology to bridge the gap, because if in contact centers, to your point, that cost reduction and that the focus and effortless experience was very narrowed to let's stop screwing things up. But the odds of having the opportunity to delight, because you can't delight everybody every time. You would spend way too much money to try to delight everybody every time. The opportunity to delight is low. The likelihood of screwing something up is very, very high. And so there is that, focus of, that leaky bucket. You pour them in the top. If you got the leaky bucket, they're going out the back.
First, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But once you use technology and capability and all that understanding and do it right to create ease, now you can flip the script, especially within contact center. I was asked it was actually 2 summers ago, I was asked, prior to ChatGPT coming out, I was asked what's the contact center going to look like in 5 years? And I honestly still believe this. I don't think it's 5 years anymore, because once ChatGPT came out, I'm like, all right, we're already almost there. I think the reality is the more technology we throw at consumers, the more they're going to want to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
So now you have the
opportunity. I was kind of waiting for that punchline, because there's a running joke that, this is the kind of thing that AI people seem to joke about, is that every presentation today on ChatGPT comes down to just a better chatbot, right? So there's always going to be a big story about how it's going to transform the enterprise. And when you get down to it, it's like a slightly better chatbot. And it's not obvious that any of this technology we've deployed in terms of chatbots has materially changed customers' perspective of the problem they're solving, or making it any better. So we seem to be focused on sort of sub-optimizing or optimizing this very narrow element of things. And I do think in some ways it is changing customers' perspective to say, I place high value on a human interaction now, because so many companies are making it actually hard for me to interact with a human.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The worst experience is when they hide the phone number and you can't find it, or or they just don't have a call center, right? When you're dealing with an issue,
or they basically put you in this infinite loop, of which you can't escape from, because you're failing to comply. So does human experience start to become a premium now, and you actually tout it? We have real people, and that's
absolutely. I think that's the future. I think businesses that use this, again, for that narrow focus of call avoidance, will end up with backlash from their own customers. And those that embrace it to say, we're going to provide you options to do things if you want to, but we're also going to make it even easier for you to contact the agent. Because if you think about it, again, going back to this future, I'm having a conversation with you, Richard, and I am a person that loves to have conversations. I'm very empathetic. That is who I am as a person. Sometimes they were the best but the worst call center agents, because they were great talking, but the multitasking and trying to do everything they had to do was very difficult. Well, we're at an age now where, not too distant future, AI is going to be listening to the conversation in real time. And if I say, as a customer, I want to sell 10,000 shares of Amazon, it's going to be plugging into the system on my screen as an agent, 10,000 shares of Amazon. I'm there to make sure it's the right information, but the articles are coming up. The generative AI is giving me summaries of what I need to say and think about, but my focus is on you. And it's now being able to be a value center, because part of that now is added products. So things we've been talking about in the contact center for decades become so much easier because the tasks are getting easier that you would otherwise have to do.
So put another way, we solve the cost problem by just making people more efficient. We make people more efficient and effective by giving them tools and data that supercharge them. So it's about creating individual productivity for the individual. Now, I don't dispute, by the way, that certain types of tasks that people want to undertake, friction-oriented tasks, aren't well suited to human contact, right? They should be solvable. Simple thing, the old adage in software engineering was always simple things simple, complex things doable. I think that's true in terms of interactions with customers. Simple things should be extremely simple, and simple today means you go to the website, you log in, it takes you 2 seconds, you get the whole thing done. I mean, how frustrating if you can't change your address online.
Mm-hmm.
Right, a mailing address. I mean, it's absolutely crazy now. You come from the financial services industry, and sometimes that's a more complicated problem. But for a lot of industries, it's inexcusable that people can't do basic operational elements online. But then complex things require nuance and human interaction. And that's where we want to create a lot of productivity. So sooner or later, are we going to start to make this distinction clear? There are tasks that people want to accomplish. There are solutions for it. And to your point, the solution for complex or ambiguous tasks is going to create opportunities if we can create sort of supercharged humans with the benefit of technology to support them.
Yeah. Well, and that, think about when I first started in the contact centers back in the, mid 90s on the phones, there was all this debate about super agent versus, siloed agent and so forth. And again, sedimentary rocks get created because, a brain can only handle so much education about a certain line of business for, your tech support and your billing support, because ne'er the two shall meet between those two folks. So they can't handle being both. The tools could enable that super agent, that ability to say one agent, no transfers, et cetera. And I think if you look then at the opportunity within the chat or the chat bots, if you will, to almost jump at the opportunity of routing you to an agent when it's likely you may need it anyway. I mean, thinking about it that way, if I'm chatting, sure, if it's something basic and easy, take care of it, move on, great. But the second, because using past data, and I know you guys know this better than most at OCX, using past data and the real data, journey data and or transactional data, you can, again, predict and even then identify what's potentially going to be the problem. We'll use that then and say, this customer is starting a path that is likely going to create a really horrible journey. Let's interrupt it very quickly and say, you know what, rather than trying to do this over, let me not just tell you to call, but let me route you, click here, let me route you to the right group with the right education or whatever, and then, move faster.
No, I think that's a great vision, Sean. I mean, and certainly beats the whole, I'm sorry I didn't understand that, could you repeat it or
right.
type it differently? So no, I think that's a terrific vision. I want to wrap up by a question back about the 4 rocks here. So when you think about the ones that you've seen companies overcome these barriers and have the biggest impact, is there one that typically is where the success lies? They've zeroed in on one of these and you've seen great results, or is it taken on all 4?
So ultimately, for organizations, they're going to have to tackle each of the different rocks in different ways, because they'll have their own, are they natively just more siloed than most others? The biggest thing is to plan and practice. to understand where your biggest challenges are by doing that kind of research, and then practice what you're going to do to both avoid it, but then also what you're going to do when you find the rock, because they'll get through. The companies that I have had the most success with working with and in this program are ones that have embraced the use of data at scale. They're bringing their contact center data together with their transactional data, with their operational metrics, with their survey data, and they're using the power. Again, we've been using AI, and I know you guys have much longer than ChatGPT is around. I mean, that's the big AI topic now, but we've been using AI for power, for knowledge for a very long time. And so, it's not really chasing this generative for the purpose of a chatbot. It's looking at the evolution of the AI that we've always been doing and using the capability to not just leverage it to look back and study, but now use it to predict and interrupt when we see that opportunity happening. But businesses are going to be challenged, to say, what is it in our business that is most likely to be? And I worked with a company that went through 7 mergers and acquisition over 5 years, and talk about change. I mean, they had an avalanche of change rocks, metamorphic rocks, and siloed rocks, and sedimentary, because it was just so much happening at once. And it took a very long time to break that all down.
M&A's got to be easy because people just do it all the time. So, I mean, how
right?
hard can it possibly be? What a great strategy, and it's unfailing, isn't it? I mean,
exactly.
Just let's bolt a few more companies on. What could possibly go wrong?
It's just magic. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Sean, thank you very much for joining us today, and congratulations on the book. We'll be providing all the details of the book in both the podcast notes and also the introduction for those of you who are interested in follow up. And I suggest, certainly, if you've got an interest in this space, that you obtain a copy and share your thoughts. But Sean, we really appreciate you joining us today, and look forward to hearing more about the reception for the book and what you see coming out in the market.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, thank you so much, and I appreciate spending time with you as well.
Thanks for listening to the CX Iconoclast from OCX Cognition. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss any of our thought-provoking conversations. And please get in touch if you want to learn more about what OCX Cognition's predictive CX analytics platform can do for your business by providing complete insights into every account, continuously updated and connected to operations. You'll find contact info in the show notes.